Hello everyone and welcome back to another live stream, another Sunday where I'll be talking about certain 3D things, and today we will be focusing on the Arnold integration for Houdini. I know Houdini is a bit, for some of people it's a bit too technical and it's super far away because it's an effects tool and it's very complicated, or at least it looks like it. But honestly, once you understand the concept of Houdini, it's honestly not that complicated, and obviously there's a very steep learning curve, and I'm just scratching the surface, at least with my knowledge. As I'm coming from a look dev lighting background, it's a bit obviously I didn't have a maths background or some software development, so I'm not fully into the Vex coding and doing super complicated particle systems using Vex and all these funky things. But I have to say I know my way around, at least in terms of doing simple look dev lighting, even advanced shading networks, because it's pretty much the same once you use Arnold in general, but at least to get a good render out of Houdini. And we will not be using Solaris. We will be working with the regular render view and the regular context of Houdini, because I just feel that it's not there yet. At least the Arnold integration is not there yet to fully use it. I'm always updating to latest Arnold versions, latest Houdini versions to see the progress, but I still couldn't get a good working version for Solaris. So leave me a thumbs up if the audio is good and the screen quality is any good. It would just help me to see what's happening. Yeah, I know Solaris is super buggy. Looks like I'm not the only one having some issues with that. So I use Houdini for maybe half a year now, so I'm not super I'm using it for half a year, but not in a professional sense, right? I'm not using it at work or anything, but I'm just messing around at home, learning all these kind of things, right? So is the stream good? I think so. I see a few more likes, which is great. So it doesn't matter. I'm using a Wacom today, so you will not see or hear any clicking, I hope. And I hope the UI scale is fine as well. And as you can see, my UI is pretty much a basic UI you get. So I just have my geometry spreadsheet here at the bottom, and the spreadsheet is similar to a what actually is that similar to? It's not like in Maya, it's not the outline. It actually shows you the properties of a mesh, like the information has. So once if I create a box or import a geometry, you will see more information popping up in there. So my scene view is obviously my regular scene view, and then I have my context here on the bottom right, which is where these contexts are different kind of states in the software where you create different nodes, and they have different kind of objectives. So the OBJ is where you create stuff like geometries, cameras, grooms, effects, sims, and whatnot happens in here. And the mat context, you create materials, image, and I'm actually not sure. I think this is for comping. This one is legacy for materials, and stage is the new thing for Solaris, but we will not go into this. So essentially what we will be doing now, I'll be showing you just very basic stuff. There will be some basic Houdini stuff as well, but mostly it's the idea is to go and render pretty pictures using Houdini. And I don't have a real agenda today, so I just kind of freeballing this, because there was lots of requests on my channels, on my social media pages to please do Houdini, please do Houdini. So I just thought I just do a live stream, because this will enable you guys to directly ask any questions, which I think is a win-win for everyone. So I'm just hitting tab here to open my creation menu or my node menu. And in here, I'm just typing file to actually do some file imports, file operations. So this is a object context. So I just go into this operator here, and then in here is a file sub, which is a surface operator. And then in a geometry file, I'm just clicking this little arrow here, and I have my, I will just start with this little dragon. It's just an Alembic file. You can also use an Alembic import, which is a bit more, it has more options to import, so I can actually use that if I know I'm loading in an Alembic. So I'm just tabbing to Alembic, going to the file name, and I'm just picking the Dragon 2 as well. So in here you can see it's a bit faster to load as well. And in here you have lots more options. You can actually select different things, but I think this is just a single mesh, so it doesn't matter. But if you have an Alembic with tons of things, you can just exclude or include certain objects here. So right now it's an Alembic. On default, it's packed. So what that means, Alembic has a more efficient way of storing stuff, so it's packing it up. I think it's similar to like how you would know it as WinZip or WinRAR. It's just compressing or packing it up, so it's a bit more efficient to work with. And it just treats it as a single point in the UI. And if it's unpacked, every vertex is a point, so it's more expensive, I guess, to work with. And by middle mouse clicking on a node, you can see its properties, at least the most common properties. And now you can see at the bottom here in the geometry spreadsheet, I have 1 point with the XYZ coordinates. And that's just 1 point because it's packed. So if I hit tab and unpack it like this, you should see it all opens up and we have now all the points available. So we have 234,000 vertices pretty much, or points on the mesh. And if I zoom in here, you can see all these points. I can visualize this using the points here on the right. There's a little toolbar. You can show point numbers, you can just show the points, you can display normals, and you can see everything is fairly straightforward here. Shift W, wireframe on and off. And what also some people do quite a lot is they change the background, because sometimes if you work at night, this blue background is super bright, so you can hit D to open your display options. And in the background tab, you have your color scheme and you can just switch it to dark. I do that actually quite often. It's just easy on my eyes, especially when the sun is down and it's a bit darker outside. But for now, I think it's easier for you guys to just see it on the light background. And again, if you guys have any questions, I have the chat open, so I'm reading the comments. So if you have any questions, if something is not clear what I'm doing, feel free to just pop in a question, and I'm happy to help you guys out if I can, for sure. All right, so now we have the unpacked dragon here, and I'm not sure, sometimes I need to convert this stuff just to make it sure it's a polygon, or at least Houdini knows it's a polygon. So I just do this now out of habit, just to create this convert node at the bottom. And this is typically when I work with Alembics. If I obviously create geometry in here, it doesn't matter much. Am I working in ACES? Yes, I'm working in ACES. I have my config file, my bed file, which launches Houdini, is automatically stored to load the OpenColor.io profile. So yes, I'm working on ACES here. And then you normally, after this, that's what I learned. That's what I have to do when I was playing around with Houdini. You always create a null at the bottom, which makes totally sense. It's like it's not an output per se, but it's just for everyone to know that this is pretty much a step in your node graph, that something is important here. So because I don't have much in here, I just type in out. And the beauty of this is, if I want to load the geometry in different places, I can open up this context, and this out node will always pop to the top because it's in all caps. So this is, yeah, it might not make sense just now, but once maybe we will show it today, it will be a lot easier to understand what's happening here. So, and now if I go out here, I can actually rename this. Let's just call this dragon. So this is now my object, or my object context. Right now the scale for this is 10 meters large. So obviously it's too big. So let's just do a transform in here to scale it down. Like that, and you can just do 0.1 in here, so it's just uniformly scaling it down. So now it's still huge. It's 1 meter pretty much, a bit more maybe, but it's better. Like Houdini is a bit different because it's software for large scene scales and everything. So the default is in meters. So everything you bring in, it might be always way too large. And sometimes if you work with different tools, if you work in real scale here, it gets a bit tricky because the values sometimes you have to work in very small values just because it's made to work in a larger scale. So we could totally do this, and let's just do it to 0.01. I think this is now more or less real scale. So 1 cube is, I think, 20 centimeters. So yeah, it is. So this is now, I guess, roughly in scene scale. You can do this. I mostly just tend to go up one, so it's a bit larger. Obviously, it has an effect on your subsurface scattering and displacement value, so keep that in mind as well. Is there a way to get the ACES config without downloading all the files from GitHub? And no, it's not possible because Houdini does not have a native integration of OpenColor.io, which means it does not ship with it. For instance, Nuke, they do ship with OpenColor.io, so you don't need to download the stuff. But what you can do if you have Nuke installed, you can just point Houdini to the Nuke OpenColor.io config files. So that's one kind of trade-off. So if you want to rely on Nuke's OpenColor.io, which is essentially the same, you can just point any other software to Houdini, to Nuke's Color.io, and then you should be good. But I have my separate color folder where I have my OpenColor.io files, and then every software reads from the same location. All right, so we have this guy. So what do you want to do next? So I think we should start working on lighting, at least to get some basic lights in here. So what I always do, I just hit tab again, and then you just have lights, and it brings up Arnold. Actually, let's just type Arnold instead. If you type Arnold, you get this Arnold light, and that's all you have to do. You just create this guy, and in the light itself, you have lots of options, right? So actually, let me save this. I haven't saved this at all, so let me just in case, you know, stuff can happen. Stuff does happen all the time. So Houdini introduction. Let's just call this live Houdini intro, like that. All right, so this is saved, and I always like to enable autosave. It will save depending on your settings. I think this is set to every minute now. The cool thing is HIP files are very small, so you shouldn't feel any lag, which is great. So next up would be to work on those lights. So we have on default, it creates you a sky dome light, actually a point light. And in here you have the options to different kinds of lights. So this is disc lights now. And what I first want to do is create a sky dome light. So you can see the lighting. Oh, well, this is way too large. So in the viewport, you have the icon scale. You just either put it to very small, or what I most of the time do, I just kill it completely. I just tick on this display. I just move this off. So it's disabled. But just for the sake of this, let's just keep it in here. And just call this one, I always like to prefix stuff. It's easier to find. So LGT, let's just call it sky, or ENV, whatever you want to do. Do you plan to take any more courses? Like if I should take more lighting courses, or if I should create more lighting courses? I don't get the full question here. So in the sky dome lights, you go to the, where is it? Light settings. You should change the type from simple color to texture, and then you have your projection, which is lat long, because we most of the time have 2x1 textures, or at least light textures. So I'm just picking one up here. I have my HDIs. Let's go to HDI Heaven, and let's just use the auto shop. I like to use that quite often. Use this EXR here, and I already converted that to ACCG in Nuke, so I just change it from utility sRGB texture, output it to ACCG. So that's all I had to do. All right, so now you can see that the color space is now on ACES. The space is ACES-CG, and this is our default light. We don't have, I don't think it supports the visualizer in the viewport, and I had this question come up on the Discord channel, Discord server as well. So I don't think you can visualize it in the viewport. All right, so right now we don't have any shader assigned. So I think if you render this now, it will not properly work. So what I want to do next is go into the material context here, which is essentially the hyper shade kind of thing, right? So you create shader nodes in here. So I'm just hitting tab and creating Arnold. It's called Arnold Material Builder. And I would highly recommend that you name this thing how you want it to be. So let's just call this MTL base as my base material, nothing fancy. I go in here. This would be my shading engine if you're coming from Maya. So I just create a surface shader, and I'm just clicking this three like little list button icon there and connect the shader to my surface here. And this just says whatever comes in the surface, this is the shader which I want to represent. And I set my defaults, which is amazing about Houdini. You can actually set your parameters, how you love them, how you want them to be. And then you could click that cog wheel at the top here, and you can just store this as a permanent default. And then you don't need to bother about your value. So what I always do, I set everything up to a neutral gray shader, which is an 80% albedo, which means 18% of the color is reflected, and a roughness of 0.6. So this is my basic setup for this. And if you want to assign this now, typically in Maya, you just right click and say assign to selection. In Houdini, it's based on namespaces. So on the dragon itself, you have this material context. So you can just assign a shader to this group, and whatever is in this group will get this shader. This is on object level material assignments. Let's say you have an object which has I don't know, like 5 dragons, right? So we could do now a copy here. So if I do a copy swap, if I do this right, copy and transform, I plug it in here and we transform this like 1.05 units actually to the right, which would be in Z space. So if I want to do this 0.05, maybe a bit more, and I just want to copy it over 4 times. So now I have, if I want 4 different shaders on these guys, it's a bit different now, because if I would assign it on top level, now everything will get the same shader. But what I can do in here, I can create a material swap in here and hook this up. And in this kind of sense, I can create 4 outputs. So I can just click this 4 times and I have 4 different shader assignments. And now I can just assign, I think it needs to be 3D connectivity. Yeah, so now I've got these 3 objects in here, and I can just select my first object here. So now the shading group from this to this is the first object. And then I can select my dropdown in here, go to the material context and assign the base material. And this would be now assigning it to this group. I can go to the next one, obviously, and I can just pick, if I change this mode to 3D connectivity again, I just pick the next one and so on, right? So this is how you would assign a different shader to multiple objects, right? But for this, at least we don't want that. So I'm just going to the object context here, go to material, go to my material and assign that base, accept it. And you can see now this is being assigned. So now we want to render, right? So if you haven't set up anything, it's a problem because it expects, like if you don't set anything and you hit go to the render view and you start the render, it expects to render in Mantra because that's its native render engine. So to circumvent that, you go to the out context, which is essentially what everything is being written out or rendered, right? So in here, you can hit tab again and type Arnold, which will pretty much create the Arnold render settings and tells Houdini you want to render with that, right? So now this little Arnold thing is active. And in here again, I set up my defaults. You can also have your presets here. Let's go to CPU production preset. You can see it's defaulting to aces. My system is set, oh, actually, I'm not sure this is off. It doesn't matter. So my system is set to CPU. I have a few texture settings. Auto generate TX files is off. I don't like that feature. I always create them manually for me, but use existing TX files is enabled. I'm just trying, like, I actually don't know if you can change the unit scale in the preferences. There must be a way, I'm sure, to change it. Let me see if there's something in here which would help. I guess I would need to do some research as well to see if there's a way to change the scale. But I am honestly not sure if you can change it. Well, I don't want to handle scale. That's not it. Pick scale. I don't actually know if you can do it. Yeah, we also always transform. So I guess it's just the habit of doing it. I don't know. So first of all, we've got 51 people watching now this introduction to Arnold for Houdini, and I want to thank everyone who joined. And if you joined just now, we're just starting now to start the render now. So I just created the Arnold out context here. My ray depth is on 2. Let's just move it down to 1 just for the tutorial here, and my SSS down to 1. So everything is on 1, and camera A, let's just go down to 4. And one last thing we need to do, we go back to the object context, and we need to render camera, right? So if I like render now, I think it will just use a perspective, but it's always nicer to have actually a dedicated camera for this. So let's just render him from this side, just zoom in here, or just frame it how you like it. And then you can control click this camera icon in the shelf. Control click it will actually create a camera from view, and you can see now it's created a camera object here. And what I then, if you want to move it, click that little lock icon on the right. Once this is locked, the view is locked to your camera. So now I can move, and I'm actually moving the camera itself, similar how you would do it in Maya as well. And then you can just click that lock again, and now it's open up, and now you can see the camera is right there. Obviously now it's super large because, as I said, Houdini is optimized for real scale or meter scale. So if you have a 20 centimeter object, it's just too small, right? So that's why all these scales are more like tailored to a meter size. Doesn't matter much for cameras. So if I go back to the camera, I just click that no cam drop down here, go to camera 1. I can go to the view settings, and I change the focal length if I need to. So I like to use 85. Now we're a bit too close, right? So I click the lock again. I'm just zooming out again. Maybe a bit more sideways, something like that. And then I click the lock again, so we are out of the camera. This is my render resolution right now. It's 1080 by 1920, so it's full HD. I think it's fine, at least for this. So I think now we have everything in place to actually get a render going. So we have the dragon, our object, our lights, our camera, and our shaders assigned. So let's just head over to the render view and start the render and see if this actually did all come together. We should have a light as well. And let's see. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. I am trying to help out and read and give as much feedback as I can. All right, so you can see our little dragon is actually rendered, and it's a bit dark, but that's just, it's a more moody environment. So the 18% might be a bit dark, but I think it fits the lighting. So it's not that it's like not working. I think it's just the environment is like the HUI is in general just darker. So that doesn't matter much. All right, so this is now our dragon in a lighting environment. So what are the next steps now? I guess introduction to Houdini, to Arnold would be obviously talking more about shaders. So I think we can go into the material context here, and we can just work in the base, or we can create actually a new shader if we need to. So you can just alt click and drag this node here, and it just creates your copy. And we can just call this network or something like that. And in here, we just be messing around. Obviously, it's not connected anymore. So I just go back to the object context. A cool trick, you can hit Ctrl+2 in a context, and you can see it sets a quick mark. And then you go to the object level, and you can hit Ctrl+1, for instance. And now if you just hit the keyboards 1 and 2, you can fairly quick jump between those contexts. It's super helpful and a lot faster to navigate. So I'm just changing the base to, you can actually type it in here as well, to network, and now we have the network assigned. If I hit re-render, I hope we are back in this network. So if I hit Ctrl+3 on this, I have now 1, 2, and 3 assigned. So if I change my color here to something funky, we can see now it's updating to be red, right? So, and now it should be, everything should be fairly similar to shading. Like we have the same nodes, they don't have the same prefixes. Like in Maya it's called I think it's always prefixed with AI, like AI standard surface or AI this and that. Right now this is on the CPU. I don't want to go on the GPU just because I'm actually capturing and streaming on my GPU right now, and I just don't want to limit the upload rate. So I hope it's fine. All right, so let's say we want to go with metallic, right? Obviously, it's very simple. You just switch on the metallic tab here, the value, and then you have your metallic little dragon. But we'll do a bit more complicated things today. So let's just reduce the roughness. Yeah, I can show you how to read surface attributes. I think I can. Yeah, that's actually a very good question. So for this, I'm just creating a flat shader. It's just called flat, I think. So I just hook this up and then you have a flat shader. So now we have a flat value. And if I stop the render now and I just go back to the object context, and there was just now a question, how can I read surface attributes, right? So if I go to the scene view here, let's just actually hide the light because I don't like it. It's super annoying. Viewport, hide this guy. We can disable the wireframe. Go back into the dragon. So let's say we have some values, right? So I just do paint attribute here. Let's do paint attributes. Go in here. And I just want to paint like a black and white mask, right? So just call this mask or whatever. I think it's actually defaulting to mask. So now you can see my brush. Even my brush is super large just because it's what I said, it's a meter scale. So now if I paint here, we should actually see something. Let's see why we don't. This is on. There we go. So now I have something painted here. And let's just paint something on the sphere here. Like that. And I don't know, maybe something here. It's nothing crazy. I'm just showing you how to read those attributes, right? So we're just creating some kind of things on the surface here. All right, so this is my attribute paint. So now we have something stored. And if you open up the geometry spreadsheet now, you can see that we have this new mask attribute here. And you can see it has a value ranging from 0 to 1. And there should also be values in between, like the blends on the edges, right? So these are now my attributes. So let's see if we can actually get this going. So if I go back to the material here, and on here you have the option to read mesh attributes using user data. So I think we just want to read user data float for this one. And then we want to create another one, float to RGB, which, dang it, float. Do we actually have that? There it is. No, float just RGB. Yeah, so I'm just hooking up the floats to RGBs here. It's just easier than I can just connect it, right? This is not mandatory to do. So in here, I think all we have to do is type in mask, and I hope it is it. Otherwise, I need to do some more digging. But I think this is how I did it before as well. It might not be in the. We might need to convert this. Oh no, there we go. Okay, never mind. So now you can see we are reading the surface values from what we just painted, right? So this is now reading in the mask attribute which we just painted. So what I can do now, I can, for instance, create a mix shader, right? So mix shader, and I want to mix them based on my little mask here. So I'm just reading the float, which is the mix. And then we have our metallic shader. Let's just mix it into 1. And then I'm just recreating this, and I'm connecting this to the other one, to shader 2. Oops. And this then would connect, and then we just assign it to the surface. So now we have those two shaders connected, right? So obviously they are still identical. So let's say I want to have the painted sides chromey. So I'm just desaturating it. And now we have these, and change it to be super specky. So now on the things we painted now, we can see now that we are reading the surface attributes, and it's fairly easy to do that, right? And obviously, if you have simulations going on, like if let's say you have a wetness map driven from particles, so if particles are actually running down your mesh, and you can tell the particles to actually do some vertex painting using attribute transfers, you can just read it into the shader directly using this technique. I'm just reading the comments. While rendering in Houdini, sometimes I get error like -9 or -11. and render stops. I don't know what that means, honestly. I never have seen that on my end, so I can't. Maybe someone in the chat would know what that's all about, but I have no clue. All right, so for any new joiners, what we just did, we actually painted an attribute onto the dragon. We read it in through the user data float, and we connected up to a mix shader node, and now we have two different shaders mixed together and driven by that single mask. Arnold Volume, are you talking about VDB volume or atmosphere? Like there's two different kinds of volumes in Arnold. All right, so we have this our little mix shader network. So why don't we create some curvature and occlusion to just break off the edges, right? So let's just create a curvature node. And what I like to do, because we don't have isolate selected in Houdini, I always just connect up my nodes to my out surface. And this is actually pretty much like a flat shader. And this will just read the values in directly. So now I can increase my samples on this. Maybe let's go to 12. And then we can change the radius to be a lot lower, maybe 0.05. We need to go lower, 0.005. That's too much. Like that. I'm not even sure if you can go lower than this. No, we can. Okay. So now you can see by just reducing the curvature even further, we can now get the nice edges and the detail. So let's say we want to obviously break it up. So essentially what happens, you have a metallic colored object, and because it has these edges, it always gets scratched up and broken up on the edges. So this is where curvature comes in handy. Just Arnold, you also have to use the defender button. What is the defender button? I have no clue. Oh, the render button. Okay, the render button to update. No, I don't need to do that. Obviously, if you change your shader, your meshes and do different shader assignments, you need to update. But I'm actually using IPR, so I can change values and it's just fine. So let's just do pretty much the same thing. So I'm just creating a new mix shader here, which is driven now by the curvature mask instead. So I'm just hooking up the red channel to the mix here, and shader to, oh, we have the shader still connected. Perfect. Oops, sorry for that. I click the little hotkey thing. So now we have the same shaders connected by the different mix. So if I hook this now up, we should see hopefully the same result, but a bit different. So now we can see that we still have our red dragon, but now the edges are a bit different, right? They seem to be a different shader. But it's the thing is why it's not super apparent is that the curvature node is not fully white on those broken up edges. You can see they're fairly grayish. So in here you have the option to push the multiply maybe to 5, which will obviously make everything brighter. And I'm not sure if those values actually go above that 1, and they do. So they go above 1 now. So that's not ideal either. So what I need to do is create a clamp and hook it up to the input here. So RGB goes to this input, and then we connect this to the mix. And if I visualize the clamp now, hopefully these values do not go above 1, and they are clamped at 1, which is essentially what we need. So now curvature is not going above that, and now we can actually reduce the radius a bit. So let's just go increase the radius, no, reduce it, maybe 0.002. And yeah, let's see what this looks like now. Go back to surface, and now we should have nice and clear pings here. Oh, point cloud lookups. I think it can actually. Isn't that how the volume would work? So it's reading the point cloud data in the VDB. I think it does that. All right, so now you can see we have this. I think the shader is just a bit too specky. So let's just bring up the roughness slightly so we have a bit rougher surface here. And next up, let's say we want to break it up, right? So the curvature right now is just uniformly everywhere, right? So next up would be to actually break it up. And what I want to do here, how to break it up, is just using a simple noise shader. So I'm just creating a noise. You have different kind of noises, cell noise and regular noise. We just use the regular noise. We create a multiply node. In Maya, it's called AI multiply, right? So just forget the prefix here. So I'm just multiplying the noise with the curvature, and actually let's do this. Yeah, let's do it now. And connect this up to the surface. So let's see what we get. You can see already it's broken up. If you just want to visualize the noise, you just hook that up. So this is what the noise looks like. And in here, you can just change the scale maybe to, I don't know, 20. And let's bring in some more detail. Let's go even more, maybe 50. And then we create a range to, like, it's like a levels or like something to add more contrast to this. We actually have a contrast at the bottom. Do we have it here? No, we don't. So I'm just hooking up these two together. So now the range is hooked up to the noise. And now we can just boost the contrast if you need to, right? So something like that. You enable smooth step so the values do not go above 1. So it's pretty much like a clamp, like a built-in clamp. And we definitely need more detail in here. So let's just go to 8 octaves. So we have more edge breakup, and let's just boost it to 80. So we have even more. We can play with the distortion a bit, so it's a bit more organic. So let's have a look again. All right, so now whatever is black obviously will break the mask. So we can contrast it up even more. Other way, like this. And now let's see the result of the multiply. And yeah, you can now see that it's not a, oh, actually, can you see? You can't see anything. So let's try now. Yeah, so now you can see that the edge is broken up. We don't have that uniform curvature anymore. So now it's nicely broken up. Let's just connect this up. And now this should look a lot better. So this is pretty much the idea of those shading networks. And you can see it's the same. Just a nice thing about Houdini is you can hit Shift O, for instance, to create these backdrops. And they collapse actually. So your nodes actually get into this little, into this box. And it just helps to actually organize everything. It's just a lot cleaner to work with. And I really enjoy this kind of thing because you can actually, you know what you do, right? If you look at your stuff like a week later or a month later, you can easily just make a beautiful node network, and it's fairly easy to see. So this would be now a metallic mixed shader with some roughness or whatnot. So the same would apply if you want to add a dust layer. So you would use ambient occlusion instead of the curvature to create these edge breakups, or the collecting dust in the corners or whatnot. Yeah, so this is that. And then there was a question about VDBs. I can try to create something fairly quick, but obviously it will not be a masterpiece, and I hope you're not expecting a masterpiece. So I go to the scene view here, and I'll just create a simple sphere, which will be my fire OBJ. And in here, I just convert this to a polygon. I change the scale to maybe 0.1. So we have a, oh, actually we can keep it at 1. So this is now a 1 meter ball, pretty much. Increase the frequency maybe to 10. And we create a null here. And out. All right, so this would be that. And now you can just click, or keep it selected. You can go to which one is it? Forgot it already. Pyro effects, and we just do something very cheesy. We just go to Fireball here, and I think this should set everything up for me. At least I don't need to do much, I hope. And then we get the Pyro Sim. So this has now the temperature and the fuel created, and then here's the sim, right? So we're on the first frame. I'm not sure why the box is so super huge. I think it will jump. There we go. All right, so one click, Fireball, boom. All right, so this is now a Houdini volume. We can change up, I think we can, do we do it on top level? Or do we do it in here? On the solver directly? Oh, it's actually on the Pyro object, right? Yeah, so the division is now this. My curvature was still wrong. What was wrong with the curvature settings? Actually, let's just not go so crazy, just because of in this sake for render times. All right, so we have this fireball object. I'm not sure if my curvature was still wrong. He's saying if I update it, will look different. Why is this on? And why do I still see it? Is it still cached? Yeah. Oh, this is the importer. Okay. All right, let's just see what the curvature is all about here. So I have my little dragon. So if I go back to render view, let's just see if it still looks the same. I think it will. I'm not sure why it shouldn't. Yeah, I don't see any difference. I think it's working. Maybe I misunderstood your question. Possible. All right, so fire object Pyro Sim, disable the dragon in here, and let's just go back to the scene view. Look through. We can look through the Pyro import, but it's essentially just visualizing the volume. Let's just create a new camera. Let's just let it sim for a bit. Like that. We can zoom out slightly, and then we just do the same thing. Lights and camera, control camera here. Which should have created me the camera. I'm not sure why we don't see the pyro anymore, because it's not enabled. There we go. All right, so now we have the fireball here. And to render this, because it's a Houdini volume, I think hit render, nothing will really happen. Let's just try and make sure we are on the camera too. Yeah, so nothing will happen on default, just because Arnold doesn't know how to handle Houdini volumes. So in here, where you import it, so we're importing it here, if I'm not mistaken. So now comes, if I still remember everything, so VDB, oh, maybe you guys need to help me out. I think, but it's just called VDB here, and then you just hook it up, and essentially you should, oh, is it? No, that's not this. So there's some kind of VDB here. Is a convert VDB, where you need to convert it to a Houdini to VDB. I think this is actually it, yeah. So you can either do this, and I think it has velocity, and to speed it up, there is like, you can split the the Houdini volume to a single velocity channel. So let's see if I remember this correctly. VDB, let's see if I find it. Like I used to do it, and I keep forgetting what it needs to be. Smooth. I think, is it vector split? No, probably not. No, there's something actually to split the velocities into a single channel instead of, I think someone here, convert VDB, yes, and then I think someone will help me quickly to find the right node to actually split it. Project none. Curvature didn't update. Well, it did update. Maybe not for you. Well, I don't know what I'm looking for now. No, it's not VDB merge. Anyways, let's just leave it as it is. And if I create a null here, this would be now my output for this. And I think, and I hope that this should be all we need to do to get something into the render view. Let's see. Still nothing. It might be because there's no shader assigned. So let's just go to the material context in here and create a volume shader as well. And then we create a volume shader. So standard volume, and we connect this. And make sure it's going to the volume tab here. So let's see if we can actually get this going. I hope so. Otherwise, I need to look up my little flamethrower tutorial, which I did a while back. And you can see like my brain is just forgetting things fairly quick. Fireball material. So let's see if we can actually select the correct material in here. I think we didn't name it. So let's just call this MTL volume, like that. See, if I'm not prepared, I'm I'm doing it wrong. All right, so, and here you can also specify what you want to see, at least in terms of the volumes. So you can say what kind of channels. And then there's also a volume, Arnold volume node, but this one actually just reads from disk, right? So if I would do like a write to disk, write the VDB to disk, I would load it in through here, and I can specify the grids I want. And then it also has a default shader assigned as well. So you can look how the shader looks like. You can create your own shader, but essentially it's just the same as I just did, right? So this is the internal built-in Arnold volume shader, and it's just reading all in the defaults. So that's just, I think it's faster if you actually write the VDB to disk and then you read it in. It should be a lot more efficient. So let's see if we actually get the shader now working. And it still doesn't show. Is it? No, I don't actually know why. Let's see. Now I'm getting frustrated here. So we have the VDB. We render from here. We have this as a VDB converted. No, maybe not. Now we have to have it converted. I think that was my problem. Let's try again. I have to do vector merge. No, I don't have to do vector merge. I don't know. So anyways, it shows up at least. So I think this is all I wanted to do. And then let's just go back to the shading context here and see if it does actually work, or it does what it's supposed to do. I think it does. Yeah. And then you just need to change the values in here, right? So now if you reduce the temperature, this is essentially what you get. And this is now reading the values, and you can boost the emission. I think normally I do put this to 10 or something. And then you get your fireball, right? So this is essentially how you would do it. And based on your quality of your sim, this is what it is. And what people tend to do as well, you just read the volume, you do a volume sample RGB. Oh, is it float? Might be float actually. Volume sample float. And this actually reads in the temperature, or you can actually specify it to read the temperature. Temperature, like that, temperature. And then you can remap it. So if I would plug this into, I need to change this to channel then, and you plug this into emission. I keep forgetting how to do this. Temperature. Maybe it's actually not temperature, maybe it is actually heat. I'm not sure what it actually writes, but it must be temperature because it was working. All right, so now we have emission in here. Let's see if this is, if I'm doing bull crap. Let's see. It's not reading it properly. It might need to go into the color itself. But anyways, I don't want to, let's do this actually. It needs to go to temperature, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, let's just leave it on black body and be happy with what we just did. All right, so this would pretty much be the volume side of things, right? I didn't actually want to go that much into the volume, so sorry for this like stuttery presentation. So next up, I wanted to talk about the outputs here. So if you want to create AOVs, right? Because I have all these AOVs set up. I don't have volume here, but if we go back and render the little dragon, we should be able to see all the different AOVs which we had set up. So if I render this again, let's see, running, not running, wrong camera, camera 1. Let's render again. There it is, and now we can actually see these different things. So we can see the specular direct, specular indirect, and I think that's all we have for this because all the rest we don't have to fuse or anything. So how do you set up AOVs, right? In Maya, you do this in the render settings, and you do the same in the out context. So you select the Arnold thing here, go to output, and then if you scroll down, you can see now I have all these AOVs in here. And you just, if you want to create a new AUV, you just hit the little plus sign here, and it will create you a new AUV at the bottom, AUV 14. You can give it a name, whatever you want it, or you can use the defaults which come with Houdini or H2A. You can select it and it will create everything for you. You can also, though, be a bit more like advanced and do it manually. So let's say test AUV or whatever, and you can actually create your own light path expression. You can build it up, and obviously you can copy it from other ones. You can see how diffuse direct would work. It's C brackets RD, I think it's reflection diffuse or something, and then all lights. And you can play around with that. You can denoise separate channels if you need to. But I have, this is my preset, so this is coming in whenever I create this Arnold out drop. So I'm getting all these AUVs for free pretty much, because I just set it up once and now it's coming in all the time. And then you have your default settings for outputting. You have your sample settings. You have adaptive sampling is up here, so min max samples when this checkbox is on, and your noise threshold to calculate how many AA samples the renderer will get. Ray depth, fairly straightforward. Motion blur, straightforward. Textures is the same. So all of these is pretty simple, or at least similar. This here would be texture baking. If you need to bake like this this shading network to disk, you can export this to a texture fairly easy. Material X, I haven't worked much with this, but you can actually specify a MTLX file and specify the look, and then you have that. Which AUV for depth of field? There should be Z. Let's just do that. I think I have it at the bottom still. No, I deleted it. So create a new one. Depth of field. You want to create depth paths, right? So there should be there's no Z in here, right? So I think all you have to do is just create a Z output, and I think this is all you have to do for it to work, unless I'm missing it. Because you can also output like the default ones. I think Z is a default one for H2A. You can see it's actually there. It's called depth, so you just click depth, and it's essentially the same thing. So if I would render this now, I'm not sure if it's visualizing. Let's see if it is. Yeah, it is actually. So this would be a Z pass, right? So you would plug this into your compositing software. Yeah, so what else do we have? So any questions still? AUVs for atmosphere. Yeah, good question. I actually never done that, so we can do that together. And maybe I can get it to work. Let's see. So obviously for atmosphere, first of all, you need a different light because it doesn't work with skydome lights. So I'm just going to the scene view here, and I'm framing in my dragon. Space G, have it selected, space G, there we go. And then I'm just, let's just view from the top here, and you can go to the light tabs. I'm not sure if I have the Arnold tab actually in here. I do not, but I thought there was one. Yes, Arnold lights. So let's just do a quad light control click. We'll create this from view. So now I can go down. We have our quad light, super huge. So let's just scale it down as well. Is there no scale for this? Let's see. Interesting. Spread intensity. I must quad size. That's weird. It's here. Yeah, okay. Transform it down. So now we have this light. And let's see actually if we can get it to work. I know that it's a volume shader. Oh, render layers. I have no idea. I think you just create different outs here. So this would be one, this would be another, this would be another. So this would be render layer C, B, and then in here, I actually don't know how you would do like hide things per different outputs. I'm sure there's a way. I actually never looked into that, so I can't give you any help on this, Leo. Sorry for that. Let's just go to our materials here and create a, I think it's called, is it in here? Volume. Let's see if it's in here. Atmosphere volume, and I'm not 100% sure if this needs to be, I think it just goes in here. No, it does not. And it does not go in here. So is there like a volume output? Like if anyone knows how to do it, it would be super helpful, but I think I have got it. It's called environment output, and then you plug it in here. Is that all we have to do? Let's bring up some density. Let's just create a camera from here. And this is ROP 3, so go in here and change this to 3 and render. Let's hope for the best. Nope. Do we still need to set something up in here to get it to work? Oh, maybe the light is just not intense enough. There's lots of possibilities here. So let's just check if we make sure that the exposure is, let's just go crank it up and check the viewport if it's actually contributing. It is contributing. Okay, so the light is definitely there. We just don't have the environment still working yet. So let's see if there's a setting in here to do that. Let's just search for, you can actually search all parameters. And so there's an environment. That's great. So where is it? It's in main. So let's go to main. And then there is shader for environments. Amazing. I've totally forgot about that. And you just plug that up. So you just look for your shader. I'm not sure why it doesn't go to the material context though. Funky. So we can just go to the material context, and I guess we just copy this, I think. And we just go up to the out and paste it. Let's hope for the best. Let's just render again. There we go. Boom. So we have something. So obviously I went all crazy. I went all crazy with the settings because we wanted to see something. So if I go back to object setting, object context, reduce the exposure, maybe let's go to 10. And then we go back to the material context and go in here. And obviously density needs to be a lot lower, 0.01. Now we see it. Yeah, thanks for all the comments. I figured it out. There's always a bit lag between the comments and me doing things. So yeah, but I figured it out. So I think we have it working. We've got our volume rendering now happening in Houdini. And you can see it's a bit of a different way of doing it. In Houdini, you need to do a bit more manual things. At least you're creating shaders manually. And you have quite a fair amount of options. You can even do the skylight with the same technique. So in the material context, you would create a new shader and create this physical sky stuff in here and all this stuff, right? It's essentially the same thing with this volume thing now. So yeah, let me know if you still have any questions. In the meantime, I'm trying something else out here in the in this environment shader, because we can add some kind of noise patterns and all these funky things. I was just looking if we can actually apply some kind of breakup, and I think we can. If I just create a noise and plug that into density, we should. I was expecting it to be broken up. Maybe it's not how maybe we need to refresh. Yeah, we need to refresh. So that's something which didn't work. I agree with that. So scale, let's just do 50. Do I need to restart it every time now? So there was no change. We could just change the mode, the color to be very low as well, 0.05. Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought this would work better if we do some kind of noise patterns. Yeah, oh, we actually see something. No, it's fine. We see the noise. So if I go back to 2 maybe and reduce this to 1, we should now see some kind of patterns in the volume. It's fairly subtle. Let's just go maybe to 1 again. And maybe I just create a range. Maybe it just helps to break things up. Input. And this goes to the RGB, sorry, to the density, not this. Like that. And now we can actually specify the range. So what I want to do, I just want to increase the input max to maybe 0.6. Let's see if that works. So yeah, again, I think this pretty much is covering at least the introduction side of things. Like anything from here will get more complex, right? So you would create more complicated connections from simulation to render to nodes, for instance, to make everything more complex. But I think this should give everyone at least a basic introduction on how to work with all these kind of settings. I'm not sure why this doesn't work anymore. It's like really driving me nuts. Maybe because my values are super low. I think that's why. What value am I? 0.001. Yeah, so that's a problem. 0.005. So now we see something there. How to get iridescence? I think that's just in the shader you do that. In the shader you just work with iridescence. Pretty sure. Let's just try quickly. I'm just disabling this environment here. So now we don't have that anymore. I go back to object level. I hide this, disable this light. I think this is all we need to do to disable lights. Or is it just for the viewport? Oh, just for the viewport. Interesting. So I'm just disabling it here. There we go. So now we go to camera 2, camera 1. And if I go back to the material context, we go to our network here. And so the question was about iridescence. So iridescence is thin film interference, right? I think that's what you're talking about. So if I hook this up, sorry, go into the shader, and this has already built in thin film interference. So you just need to specify a larger value in here. You can already see there's some kind of purple on it. It's not too apparent though, but I could see it here. And then essentially this is, well, it's super hard to see for you guys, I guess. If we change this to metallic, you can see now the color. So this would be thin film interference or iridescence, and you can specify this by plugging maps into the thickness. I already showed how to render VDBs. So you can just scrub back and see that if you want to. I used Arnold and Houdini a year back, but I could not find a blocker for lights. There are blockers, but they are not visually in the viewport, so you just need to eyeball it, which is a bit funky, right? So you can create the network for it. Obviously, it's also a shader, right? So it's the same as I showed before. So on the object here, you have your lights, and they do not. You need to. This is actually where the default light filters are. So you can just jump into this location. Right now, there is no light filter. So if you want to create a blocker, you just create it, hook it up. So now this has a light blocker, but the matrix, obviously there's nothing there. So right now, if you want to visualize it, you would need to create your own little SOP and hook it up to these kind of matrices here to actually see it in the viewport. That's unfortunately right now, that it's the limitation. But again, it's working. You would just need to specify the matrix, which is a pain, but you can totally connect something to this matrix here. But I don't know how. Matrix transform. Matrix transform would go in here, and then translation. You can actually, this is now easier to manipulate already. So right now it's all zeroed out. The scale is on 1, and I think you can just create a connection here. So now at least if I would move it, it's still not visually there, but it's at least easier to transform it, and you don't need to mess with those matrices. So this would be blocker stuff. So I showed how to render VDBs. I think Arnold lights play nice with lobs already. I checked that out, and I could get something to render, but it was still super buggy. So if I go to the stage context in here and I just do a scene import like that, I think we should get everything. Okay, let's just maybe not do the VDBs. Let's actually get rid of the VDB here. Pyro Arnold Volume. Let's just get rid of this. I know I could just change it on the import, but I'm lazy. So now we just have this, and this is now actually Solaris, right? We have our we've got Karma in here and Arnold. So in here you can actually, let's just not do this. I should have done this the right way. So scene import, and then you can just specify what you want to import. And I just want to have the dragon. No, sorry, this was not correct. I want the dragon. There we go. And then you can create a light like this, and this needs to be connected. So, and this is now a light. So you just change this to a disk or a rectangle. So this would be now a lob light, uniform scale. Like that. And then this is already a Arnold light as well. So it depends on the context I think you want to render it in. It's hard to know which direction it is. Is it? No, I'm not sure why. I'm not sure in which direction it's facing. It might be the opposite way now. So you can obviously start Karma render now, where you can see now this is rendering in the viewport using Karma. You've got your basic properties, so you can push the exposure to 5 or whatever. And this would be obviously not Arnold. It's Houdini's new render engine. So if I stop this, oh, actually, if I just move to Arnold, let's see what happens. If it crashes, it might crash again. It does that occasionally. You can see it's already the spinning ball here. Let's see, spinning. You see, and I don't know if I'm just doing anything wrong here. Like, I don't think it shouldn't do this. At least I'm not sure what it's doing right now. Color session when started. So I think we're dead. Let's just create a new Houdini, just at least to be safe. Maybe it will come back. So yeah, you can see why I'm not using this. It's just a pain. It just doesn't work for me. At least I think I'm just doing things wrong here, because I had seen people use it already properly. They might have a different build, but I don't know. It just doesn't work for me here. But whenever it will be working, whenever it does work, I will do a video on it for sure. So obviously follow me on the social media sites. I'm mostly active on Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And yeah, I know it sucks. Like, crashing things is a bit annoying. Yeah, so I don't think we need to bother more with the Solaris stuff unless it's working properly. So I want to thank each and every one of you for joining this Sunday. For most of you, it's already late in the evening, I guess. So yeah, thank you very much. And obviously check my latest tutorial as well. It's on my channel. And yeah, thank you guys again. And I will see you. I think the next tutorial will be end of next week again, maybe Friday. I'm not sure about what I want to post, so be sure to message me or just add a comment in the chat below if you have some cool ideas of a new topic for a new tutorial. Yeah, for quick question about the splitting the AOVs. Yes, you can fairly easily do that if you just create an output here. Let me just scale the UI quickly. If you just create an Arnold tab in here and someone was talking about light groups, right? So you just go to the out tab again. Is that actually not loaded now? Oh, it's at the bottom here, right? I just grabbed my CPU production here. So on the output side, you just you can see there is a per light output. So if I hit just plus, and there is like a per light output somewhere. So let's see if I can find it. Emission, let's just do, where was it? You just specify, at least you just specify the tag. It's not too complicated. I was just looking if there's a preset for this. At least there's something in here, I think. So light path expression, is that in here? No. Well, you can see it's the same way as this specular direct. This would be nice if I could just copy this. So this would be custom event. So instead of where is it now? Instead of this code gene blah blah blah, you just put in your rs square bracket and you just specify the light, right? You just specify the light group. So if you create an Arnold light in here, there should be a grouping somewhere here, light group. So you do test or whatever, and then in your out drop you just specify it in here. So man, this sucks now. So here it is actually for light group. So this would be a default. So this would be blah 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 test. So everything will go into this AUV now. So obviously if you want to specify it, you can just do specular, right? You just specify a specular light and you just do the same tag, and this will then only go to that light AUV. Anyways, so that's it. No questions. Everything what you can do in Arnold Maya, you can do in 3ds Max. I just don't think they have color management in Max, so that's a limitation. Lighting, Houdini is not used widely for lighting. It slowly starts using Solaris and RenderMan because that's a great implementation right now. My Arnold the basics are good. My Udemy tutorials or my classes on Udemy are good for fundamentals for sure. All right, so that's it. I hope you guys a great start. The next good start for the next week, and obviously stay healthy, social isolation, and yeah, respect that, and hopefully everyone gets healthy fairly soon. So thank you guys again, and please leave me a thumbs up if you like that video, and obviously always share it if you can. That means a lot to me, and I'm out.